3, 2, 1. Kia ora, Kale. Welcome to the podcast again for our 50th podcast.
Bit of a pleasure to be back, mate. Thank you for having me.
Pretty incredible that for someone, myself, who didn't really want to do a podcast, we've now done 50, and it's been one of probably the best experiences I've had, I'm going to say, in my life, actually. It's been an amazing experience getting to speak to people on the podcast, learn from them, get through them, and it's going to be cool for us to chat through what you've been up to, what Rugby Brick's been up to, a little bit about what I've been up to throughout these 50 podcasts. So why did you want me to start the podcast in the first place?
Yeah, so I think the thing that people do throughout their day-to-day life is that we've all got activities, right? And there's just mundane parts throughout our day that require both our hands. And one of the things that I think of is I'm a big learner. I love learning, but I do have mundane tasks, folding and washing, doing the dishes, going out for walks and sort of things where I still want to continue learning. And obviously I saw audio consumption going up as a full trend. And for you, people love the content. And so to give them an easy option to actually be able to passively consume the things that we talk about, but also the big upskilling on your end and the fact that we get to talk to some really world-class people, and it's led us to, have PR across, 30 to 50 different outlets, and got us an international news coverage. So it's led to some pretty cool, exciting outcomes for us. And anyway, to support our customers and the people that support Rugby Bricks to get more opportunity to have an interaction with us, it seemed like a no-brainer for me.
100%, and it's such an easy listen, and I've had that feedback before from people and myself as a consumer of podcasts at the gym, going for a run, training sessions, or just generally working, having something on in the background where you feel like you're getting some knowledge, learning some new ideas and things is a great way to go about it. So if you've turned up to this podcast and you're thinking, the boys have been lazy, they haven't even got a guest on, just hold fire. We are going to talk about some cool stuff. So with Kale, I'll just give you an overview of how this podcast will work. So we're going to talk to Kale about presenting all around New Zealand. He's been doing some cool stuff with Digital Boost, helping companies grow digitally. Common mistakes people make when they are jumping into this online world, and also roles in a team. So we recently did a bit of a workshop as a Rugby Bricks team that Kale led us through, visionary, sales, marketing, and then also defining our roles. So do we get it? Do we want it? And are we capable to do it? So some really cool chat around that. And then some of the chat that we'll get through on my end. So Melbourne Storm kicking coach role. I haven't actually spoken about this on the podcast or in any format. People have probably just seen the content coming out of Rugby Bricks. So I'm going to talk through that. Rugby Bricks brand growth, what's next, and also working with athletes and growing, building, learning. So that's the overview. Let's jump straight into it. So my question first up, Kale, is you've been presenting workshops all around Otago, down the bottom of New Zealand with Digital Boost. I want to know, what is it? Why is it? Why are you doing it? And how have you enjoyed it?
Yeah. Well, look, for the wider group and listeners and for Kiwis, Digital Boost came out of post-lockdown, and a lot of initiatives similar to this across all parts of the world is that when we found out that obviously we had to spend, multiple weeks inside and we had no reason to actually leave the house legally. The only reason you could go was to get groceries. It turned out a lot of small businesses in New Zealand and sort of employees as well actually couldn't communicate with the outside world very well. In New Zealand, and a few stats around this, just over 45% of New Zealand small businesses don't have a website.
Wow.
And so if you're in lockdown for 4 weeks, and you've got no means of communication with your customers, it makes it hard to sell something to them. And then the other piece around that I think for what it looks like is New Zealand, obviously, for us, we're a pretty cool country in the way that we're based around sort of rural farming. We love word of mouth and chatting with one another. And so that's typically how most of us have been sold, in the fact that a mate tells someone, hey, heard about a really great product. For example, let's use Rugby Bricks. That's usually a pretty trusted method to get it out. When you don't have that ability to do that, and you're a company trying to figure out how to sell online, that's a really, really big burden for you, is because people then can't figure out how to find you. And so the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment put out a RFP, which just means a request for proposal. A consortium of myself, so our company Knj Growth, the team at Indigo, so the people who bought Manaki and Choice, and then another company called MindLab, all came together and we said, hey, we've got some pretty good digital insights from what we've done. We'd love to sort of help deliver the content around people, to teach them around how to build a website, how to market online, how to improve your productivity. So anything that you can actually do to stop you from doing sort of more manual labor that you can sort of automate online. And then a few of the other pieces around future tech like AI, cryptocurrencies, a couple of those sort of things, and put all of them to one place. And so you just go to www.digitalboost.co.nz, you can log in and jump onto that. And then the other piece of that is just going to rural communities. So I've had the privilege of just going through now. I've chatted to 17 towns throughout Otago and Southland. Still got a few big chats to go. I'm going up to Christchurch. I'm doing a workshop there, and they've got a couple of big ones with the Minister of Small Business in Wellington and then one in Auckland. So those sort of chats, just going out and getting in front of people. Public speaking is something that I'm not bad at, but it's certainly something I still find nerve-wracking. And delivering some of that there is just, for most people, and I think small businesses and actually the literacy of everyone, like we could be doing better digitally. And so that's what I've been finding. Most people want to chat throughout these sort of small workshops in Otago. It's just that our literacy of how to do things online is really, really low. So it's been a really, really interesting time.
Fascinating. And I think everyone listening to this podcast is here to get more knowledge, but also has their own ideas. So there'll be a lot of people thinking, I want to start this small business, sell this little project on the side. We always talk about side hustle with Gary V, outside of your 9 to 5. So if you're a one-man band, like I was with Rugby Bricks, and trying to juggle so many balls, what's kind of that first process of setting up a website to get your online presence going?
Yeah, so I guess that the first thing I'd actually do before that is actually find out if your customer's online. So one of these things that I've been going to, obviously with these rural workshops, is that if your customer's not online, there's probably no point in getting online. But one of the things that's come out of this is just there's a typical sort of hit and miss with business sense, right? The reason we get into business is a lifestyle. We go through, we have passionate things that we care about that we obviously want to try and give to the world. And then the other piece is obviously to make money from it, right? And when we think of those three things, that's what we're getting out of it. But we all have to do that through the mechanism of serving a customer. And so one of the things that, we've done recently, and I did at the start of the year once we've got Joe, is defining really, really strongly who your customer is. And so the first part of doing that is, before choosing to build a website, getting a Facebook page, one of those key things is actually understand, where is your customer spending their time online? Could you just build, a Facebook page and do it through a Facebook group and get customers to come buy from you that way, as opposed to doing it in so many other means? And so when I look at it at this front, is just actually getting the real basic data of what is their age, where do they live, what are they interested in? If you know what people are interested in, you can probably go look at the types of blogs, the types of websites, the things that they're going to visit online, what are the Instagram pages they follow. All those key things give you a good indicator of, where your customer is and how they're spending that time. And then from there, once you've got that, you can build out everything else around it, because we're here to serve a customer. The reason we have a podcast is to actually look after our customers and give them more free info so that they learn about us, but they also get the extra knowledge. And so that key piece is just taking that first step back and knowing, cool, how do I really know who my customer is, but also fall in love with them so that I can actually serve them the best as I can.
I love that tip about maybe a Facebook page is the way to go. That seems smart as shit, especially if you're say a coffee cart in a local town.
Yeah.
You actually don't have an online product to sell, but you could say, hey, I'm going to be down at the netball courts at this time, blah, 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 Facebook engagement, loved your coffee,
exactly right.
That's
and it doesn't cost you. That's the thing, right? And so as a small business owner, for what it looks like, and the general public, when people think of small businesses, everyone's like, oh, you're a business owner, you're making cash. When in reality, you're just hustling to get everything as much as you can to keep as much profit. But a lot of the times, there's a heap of expenses most people don't see day to day that, you're trying to obviously save on. And so, if a website's something you can save on, start with a Facebook page and then figure out if you need a website. And the key piece that we're trying to educate people on with digital is that some of the times Facebook might want to play ball. Obviously, for you in Aussie, you would have seen when the news outlets got taken off Facebook and all social media. And some of the times you have to just understand some of those risks that come with owning, not owning your own platform, which is a website versus a social media page. But when you're starting out, if your customer's online on Facebook and you can serve them that way without having to build a website that costs you, $500 to $1,000 done cheaply, then shouldn't spend it.
What's your chat around word of mouth? I think it's absolutely still the king. We put a lot of energy into making sure our word of mouth are good. When I run into people at rugby fields, they always say, my coach told me to look at this post. My coach sent me this post. My dad sent me this link. What's your chat around word of mouth for these small businesses?
Yeah, I think for any person, individually or business, we all have a reputation, right? We all have a know, like, and trust factor. So anytime that you recommend me something, I'll ask you about it, but I'll usually take that recommendation much higher than I would from a stranger. And so one of the things that word of mouth is it's just, we've all got this personal sphere of influence. And if you look at what influencers are, it's just word of mouth at a 10x rate. You know what I mean? And so the thing that I think of on this front is that, we all have this ability to actually influence others. And the best way to do it is by telling another person that trusts you about it. And so there's no other thing higher than word of mouth, and the fact that you get a good marketing recommendation because you trust other people. But if someone who you trust says, go check out this resource, and every other time they've told you to check out a resource that's going to be great, you're going to do it. You know what I mean? And so there's just literally the best part around digital and going online is you can just get and accelerate that word of mouth through other platforms, right? And so for us, I look at what our organic or free traffic is. And most of it, like our website traffic has generated, probably 70%, actually greater than that, like 80% is just through socials. You know what I mean? Other people just referring other people saying, great post from Rugby Rex, go check them out. Great thing from here, go check them out, right? And it's just other people sending links of our stuff to each other. And then people ended up on our website. So there's just nothing greater than it. And when you're a small business owner, or even as a person, and you care about this, and when it comes back to sport, is that if you've got someone and trust inside of you, and they tell you to do something, when you're on the field, you're going to trust that person to execute, right? And we've all got those trust and sphere of influence factors. And so the greater you can make that, the better word of mouth you'll have as a person and as a business.
Great chat. One of the highlights of kind of the last little period of traveling around, has there been some cool moments or met some cool people that you think, man, that was special, and grateful for that opportunity?
Yeah, some really amazing stuff. I think the best part, what we tried to do is, it's really, if you've never met me before, and I come in and I'm talking to you about being a digital expert, and that's what my day job is, it's really hard to sort of relate to, because obviously for me, I can talk about it, and it seems easy for me to talk about, digital marketing, pixels, analytics, tracking, all that sort of stuff, because it comes second nature to me. The best part for me has been each event that I've taken or gone to and spoken at, as I've taken a small business owner with me. So for a lot of the ones in Otago, I took a plumber, Matt Maley. He runs a business called iPlum. They're doing pretty well. But for him, you wouldn't really associate a tradie with digital marketing, right? And one of the things, he's just got the biggest social media following of a plumber in New Zealand. And for that, he's, for when he initially started out, 60 to 70% of his business was just through Facebook. His whole thing around this was, hey, I want to create a desirable brand. And people would obviously, plumbing's not one of those things. I don't really think about plumbing as sort of a high class thing. But he said the only thing I did differently is, like, I would never ever take, pictures of pipes and poos. But what I would do was I'd go and take a picture of the finished bathroom, put that up and chuck it on social media, and put it in front of the right people. And he said that was it. And for me, hearing, that there is, I got to see a lot of other people where that light bulb moment clicks, a mechanic, another plumber, tradies going, oh shit, I could do that. You know what I mean? And these are people who have never thought to advertise online, but in reality, the biggest thing for them has been able to go through and sort of say, shit, that's actually an idea that could really work well for me. And it's not that hard. You know what I mean? And he gets up and he presents like that, and he says it. And he said, all I did was take a couple of photos, go back, dust up off the site. It takes me about 20 minutes, get one of the boys to take a snap on their phone, send it through, and then chuck it on Facebook. And so, seeing that sort of stuff, I really, really loved it, because there were a heap of other people that just resonated with. And I had a tradie come up to me at the end, mechanic, and he said, mate, like, no one's ever explained it to me in that light. And it's just been, he's like, I've never thought about it, but it's so simple. It should just show, either the boys working on the car, or what it sounded like before the car started, when it was broken down, and what it was like afterwards.
100%. And like those problem solvers, the people in the problem solving industry, a plumber, we all know that when that toilet's leaking, you will pay whatever it takes that day to get the shit sorted. Same with your car. If your car's not working, you're just like, I do not know how to solve this problem. Fix this problem for me. Get it done. And you're right. If that person can create a following, which then creates another employee, builds the business, things get bigger. It's really cool to hear those sort of stories. How's your trip to Oamaru, out of interest? I'm an Oamaru homegrown boy. I'm sure that they turned it on for you.
Yeah, they did actually. I loved it. So we ended up getting some people coming in from Waimate, and a few other people traveling from a couple of the other sort of outside region. We ended up having roughly about 40 people, and I was in the sort of, I think it was like the town hall auditorium where the seats are stacked up one another, and you're in this like theater space. It's quite sort of a surreal experience because there's like just a spotlight on me, and then people are in the dark. And so I'm presenting to this group of people, and it's really hard to gauge an audience when you can't see their faces. But I loved it. I talked about you, talked about rugby bricks. A few people just said, how many people here know the Breens? A few hands shot up. And so it was it's nice when you actually can have a bit of rapport with people about a sort of common link. You're a bit of a sort of a hometown hero there, mate. But
it would have been funny for you seeing the people from Waimate turn up in horse and cart. That would have been good. That leads me to my next question. One thing that I think we get the balance right, and I've definitely been trying to bring this into my coaching, is I talk to players about when someone turns up with you in a conversation with banter, come back hard with banter. When someone turns up with you with professionalism, hey, Pete, I need you when you pass this ball and put it out in front of me, put it on the spot, on this move, then hit them back with professionalism. And I think it's one thing that we organically have got really good at, is that if you're hitting me up about something and I can hear in your tone of voice that this is professional, come back professional. So I just wanted to get that point in there somehow. And now I have.
I'll touch on that very quickly, right? Is that we're very good at, obviously, we have a business where we get to do what we love, right? But rugby is something for me, especially as a battler where I do and got to play rugby as a portal for communication, has been something that I've loved, and on that banter side and the professional side, right? And I think for most people like that, there is you set a tone, but that's what culture is, right? Is how do you get a mixture of the light and then the heavy so that you can actually do both of the works on that. And coming back before I finish up, I'll go with a little bit of banter. I actually ended up going out to see Leo Breen at the end of that workshop. So ended up going to Whitestone Contracting and had a bit of a chat with him there. So he was a very, very, what can I say? He's an incredible man, but really, really supportive of everything you've done. And one of the things that I think I've always wanted to mention this, because I've always thought of maybe I'd say it for a podcast, is the incredible amount of pride he talks about when he talks about you is something that I've very, very seen really in any parent. I know people love their kids, but it's a real touching sentiment, because he talks about us and rugby bricks, and especially you, in such a light that it gave me a really, really strong appreciation and gratitude for what we do. So I thought I want to mention that now because it is a real special moment.
I'm sure our dad and Leo will be listening, and he'll be loving that. He was on the podcast. If you do want to search the Leo Breen podcast, it's a really great insight into self-confidence, building that into children. And Dad's been world class when it comes to building self-confidence into his kids. So he's done a great job. A great listen. Knj Growth.
Job sometimes.
Knj Growth is your other business that you're a part of, and I know that team's been building. You took myself, Joe, our new marketing and sales project manager, through, I guess, a course or a bit of a workshop on how we can define our roles and get some really good vision and understanding around that, how we can help each other better. And I like how you've done it. So firstly, talk us through Knj Growth, what that is. I know our listeners will be really keen to hear about that, how the team's grown, and what you're up to there.
Yeah, so Knj Growth, we started 4 years ago. It's not a very original name. My name's Kale, and then the other business partner's name is John. And so obviously we just took the initial of our first name and then put growth after it. What we do is we're a digital marketing agency. So for us, we work with some really, really high-end clients now. But when we started, it was just the two of us. We're now a team of 21. And so we've had the opportunity to grow and get bigger. But our key thing is what we do is just help scale businesses through digital marketing for the most part, and been able to work with some companies like TikTok, Microsoft's another one of our clients, right through to sort of the local gyms and startup space. So very fortunate and privileged to do the work that we do.
And organising the team, you obviously did it with Knj Growth. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I think for me, when I start this out as, I'm 30 now, and growing any form of business from when you're like 26 in terms of having a leadership position through to, when we've got in our team, I'm 30, and that 4 years, there's been a lot of change for growing a team, how you lead, what it looks like, and what it actually means to create a culture of, one, serves the business outcomes, but also serves everyone inside of the business. I definitely know when I started that my job, I thought it was as a leader, was to please everyone and make sure that, they love the working environment. And as I've now grown, I found that never to be the case. I think for the biggest part is giving people the key piece of purpose and accountability to be some of the things, because there's two types of leaders I find when I look at it in this one. One is the person that facilitates people to be able to do their job well. And then the other one is followed by example. And they usually cross over quite well, but the followed by example types usually have a bit of a higher ego and saying, look, I'm so great, do this. And when you get that type of thing where some people who have that type of leadership saying, I'm in charge, I do go through and can work and can inspire people. And I certainly tried that myself when I started. Whereas the other one to where you're going through and you're being results driven and you're facilitating work for others to be great, people usually step into that and take that type of light. And so for us, that's where we're sort of getting to the point now is the business doesn't need to run through us. It actually needs to run through the great people that we've employed. And, we've adopted a system that, the one that you mentioned is called the Entrepreneur Organization System. It's from a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And we've both facilitated a bit of a coach with that. But, for me, the way that I think about this is that as a leader, your job is to show up. You do your job, but your job is essentially to facilitate other people to be great, and then stick to the one skill of actually, cool, this is my job in the team. That's how I'm going to do it. And then you make sure that others can be great at what they choose to do.
One of the things I did enjoy working through was GWC, gets it, wants it, capable to do it.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more on that principle?
Yeah, sure. So inside of EOS, that Entrepreneur Organization System, what we're trying to do when we're building out any team, and this is in business, but I think it applies to most teams, is that you're going to have people who there's a leadership framework, right? And so for all of us, we'll say, we're looking at trying to achieve some form of goal or outcome. There's going to be the person who's the visionary, the captain, in most tables and examples, is they're going to be choosing how the team executes on that plan. Then what you've got from there, and in our example, is there's an integrator, so how you go about doing that. And then there's key positions as you go down that rung and chain. And so when you have a look at when we're populating a team, we've got these sort of 4 pieces in our ones, which is sales and marketing, finance, operations and tech. And then the other piece of sort of that key piece is either HR or culture. What you want to do as a senior leadership team, and when you're going through this, is there's that GWC, and you have people who need to fill these key roles in your business. But you as the person who gets nominated for that does not get to vote on whether or not you want that role. It's your team members that get to decide whether or not you get it. So if you actually get what the key function is, you want it, whether that's a yes or no. And then the last piece is they have the capability to do it as a yes or no. And when we go through this sort of thing and these examples of doing it, is there's going to be transitory periods. Everyone's in sort of flux in terms of when you're in a business, you're moving. And so you're always going to have to decide, there's going to be people who don't exactly want to fill the role, but they're capable of doing it, right? And so when you do this GWC, gets it, wants it, capable of doing it, the other people vote, and it's only a yes or no. And so you'll find what people do is that if people get assigned to a role that they get it and they're capable of doing it, but they don't want it, they'll get very, very good at executing on it and then actually outsourcing out the rest of it. And so one of those things there is that when you assign people to things that they don't want to do, but they know it's good for the team, they'll figure out the best way to actually go through and execute it. And they may fall in love with the role, or they'll get so good at understanding what the role is about that they'll delegate it to others. And so that system in itself is really, really strong for, one, taking people's egos out of it. Because when people decide what they're really good at not, you have others do that for you. And so, you can say you're really great at something or you really want something, but either you could be lying to yourself. When you have other people reflect on what your options are, then you get that ability for them to actually make the decision for you. And you can see, okay, cool. Yep, that is the sort of closer, more accurate version of what's going on here.
There is so much in this, and I guess I'm interested to hear how you think that this type of conversation could relate in a sporting team environment. I can think of it like a leadership group in a rugby team. How could you see that integrating?
Filtering through. So this is one of the things I've now that we've been adopting this and going through it. The key piece that we talk about there is the whole thing that we're trying to fill in is called an accountability chart, right? And the key thing about entrepreneurial organization system and the traction book in itself is a lot of people will think, okay, cool, I want to build out my leadership strategy and decide where we're headed first. But the difference for what you actually want to start doing is you want to build a great team of people first and then decide, right? Because if you get the people in the right positions, and so I'm going to use the rugby example, if you choose people who are in the team and you get them filled into the right positions in the team, and they've got those key characteristics of being accountable, the piece of they're saying, cool, I'm the type of person who will put my hand up when things screw up. I'm the type of person that regardless of how talented I am, I'm here to help the people inside and outside of me. And then the last piece is I'm happy to be subservient in the fact that I'm able to serve the greater good of the team. You then get to start this position of, once the leadership team decide this is where we're headed, there's also going to be individuals that will take account for all the things that go wrong, right? And the best part that you look at for some of these things of going through is that if we've got a leadership team that's deciding, okay, cool, I'm the captain, and let's say just traditionally, you're usually some sort of 7, 8, or 6 that's somewhere in the forwards, you'll be looking at there and you'll be deciding, okay, cool, your vice captain and your coach, and then you've got the other backs coaches there who are deciding what this might look like for how you go through the team. Is you can choose and define the roles, and you'll get the people who get it, want it, and they're capable of doing it. And the thing is, when you're deciding that sort of stuff outside of what the people are doing based on not just their skills, but the key soft characteristics, which not talked about well in rugby, and a lot of people don't understand, is if we can make some of those decisions for those other people as a group and collective, we then actually have a good understanding of putting those people where they should be at the right time. And you'll find that people, have those key pieces inside of sports teams is that they've got the talent to do it, but they probably sometimes don't want it as much as the other person could do. And the person who wants it more, I think, is going to be the person who's the one that you're going to want on your side, right? Because the skills, as much as it is, the technical stuff, there's very few things that can't be coached, right? And the key piece that I look into this is there's some really incredibly talented players out there. But, when you have some of those things that we have in a team where you can teach someone to pass better, that's easy. But you can't, it's very hard to teach someone some of the softer skills to be more accountable and remove their ego from the situation. And so for me, when I think about this, gets it, most people get the role that they have to play. If I'm a winger, I know what I need to do. Do I want it? Yep, probably for the most part. But if I don't, if I'm in a maybe space and there's someone who really, really wants it, that person's going to probably be able to have everything to do it. And if they're capable of doing the key things, the soft and the technical skills, that's the person you're going to want, not the other side of the person who's technically pretty amazing, but not willing to serve the team.
The thing that I like about all this chat is it is about people. And I heard Scott Robertson talk after, they just won 5 championships in a row. And he was talking about the Crusaders set up in the building. And he said the building doesn't have any ideas. It's the people within the building that have all the ideas. So that's why we value them and make them feel so important and valued. So, mate, I'm big on this stuff. That book, again, for anyone who wants to dig deeper on this.
Yeah, so Traction by Gino Wickman. It's a very, very strong business book for anyone who's a small business owner and that sort of thing. But again, I think of team culture as being the pivotal piece for any organization. A rugby team's an organization, a small business is an organization, and we're operating for one key outcome. Rugby, we're after wins. Business, you're typically after wins. And so the thing is that you can, for me, I love the jumping across multiple areas is because just similar to what you're asking me and what you're learning in business is now applicable to sport. And it's the same thing that I ask you when you go away from camps. What did you do different? What was special about it? What did you recognize? What are some of the teams, the key pieces that you guys communicate? And so this piece here is that if you think of something as not being in your industry or not being in your lane, there's some good chances that there'll be key pieces of what someone else is doing that you can take and put and apply to your own learnings.
Yeah. Massive, mate. And the last question I've got for you, I feel like I've done most of the heavy lifting on this podcast so far. The last question is the coolest person you've met this year throughout your work and had an interaction with? Who's that?
Yeah, so I think, and it's not quite, maybe this in the most last year. So for those of you who don't know, I would be surprised if any people know, there's a guy called Rolf Masfin. He owns the Masfin Group. And so they're a really, really large just private equity firm. They do a lot of investing, but he's one of New Zealand's richest people, probably a top 10 richest person in New Zealand. I got the opportunity to meet him in Auckland. And the thing there, and what I've been finding is I've been reading another really great book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, which talks about lasting organizations. But when you hear of the types of billionaires, and I'll ask you this question now, if you think of just some tech billionaires, name a few off the top of your head.
Gates, Elon Musk,
yep.
Facebook, Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg. So each of these people have really sort of, huge personas. People think about them as really, really strong leaders. They've got these sort of personal brands that come behind them and that sort of stuff. One of the things that I found when I met Rolf is that this guy, I could say probably maybe not even 1 in 1,000, probably 1 in 100,000 people in New Zealand know who he is, maybe 1 in 1,000,000 even. And this guy was so reserved about how well he acted. And the thing that he cared about most was, how do I get better results? And everything else for him was, is doing a media interview results. Not really. People can get to see it. Has some of the things here, but for him, he was so results driven and focusing on finding out what is the key formula to success, that all the things that, that come with when people perceive as being rich, the fame, the limelight, shunned it and had no desire for it because it wasn't producing results. And there's times where things like this, where we have things where a podcast gets to reach and scale, in his industry, made no difference for him, did not bring him more deals, and did not bring him in the ability to succeed. So he had no care for it. And for me, when I think of my ideal success, is that this guy is largely like anonymous. People have no idea who he is, but he's also one of the people that has shaped, Auckland's infrastructure. He owns most of Ponsonby. He decides for what that looks like in terms of the commercial setting for this, and is involved in sort of some of the biggest decisions that we know about in New Zealand, but no one knows who he is. And when I think of leaders who are that great, who are able to make huge influences and outcomes and choose different results, but are quiet, reserved, and able to act in the best success of the team without taking the limelight for themselves, those are the people that I think you want to be around, because those are the people that are so success orientated that they make others better. So Rolf Masfin.
What a great conversation, sounds like.
Yeah.
Cool, mate. That's my job done. So if you've got any questions now, just to be clear, you gave me a lot of feedback on my questions when we started the podcast and how to improve with asking questions, skill set, communication, talking points. So I will be listening very carefully to how good your questions are.
Yeah, and I think for anyone who's listening, we're at episode 50 now. And you'd hope that obviously Pete asked me some better questions than he did on episode 1. So for those of you who are interested, go back and have a listen and see if he's improved. You guys can be the judge of that. But any critiques or feedback, we're all after them. So on that front, I'm very excited to jump into yours. So I think for everyone here, and what we've done is we've front loaded a lot of sort of the operational stuff, how Rugby Bricks works, that sort of thing, and where the place I sit in there. But I do want to jump and switch to some of the highlight reel stuff that a lot of people see day to day, which is obviously the content that we post on Instagram. And one of the things that you've been most quiet about is obviously taking the role as the kicking coach inside the Melbourne Storm. So I would love to understand for you, you know what I mean? You started coaching probably at this level almost 5 years ago now, in terms of just getting into it.
Yeah, and 2017, I think first video, yeah.
Yes, okay. So there we go, 4 years. And we're now at the place where you are the kicking coach for the Melbourne Storm. You're the attack coach for the Wallaroos. I'd love to hear a little bit even about, one, how you got the role, but two, the impact and sort of your reflection on where you are today.
Yeah, I still remember, I remember a lot of stuff about Rugby Bricks, but I remember the first couple of videos in Whangarei when I was living out there playing for Northland, getting started, putting the camera on a soccer pole, probably an iPhone 5 maybe, filming on that, getting started. And then coming, I suppose, fast forward through all that learning process, you came on board, moving over to Melbourne, getting started. And then I remember being really impressed and blown away when I first got to Melbourne, heading down to a Rebels training. This when I was playing, got invited along to come in and play. I think I played for the development side. And I turned up to training. The Melbourne Storm were just wrapping up. They were walking off the field. The big dogs, Cam Smith, all those guys were walking off the field. I was there with the Rebels. The Melbourne Demons AFL team were training on the pitch right next to us. There was the soccer team training, the Melbourne Victory, and surrounding us was Amy Park, the MCG, Rod Laver Arena, the tennis courts. So I've come from Whangarei or Dunedin, where the king of the town's the rugby team, and that's it. And I've got into this environment where I felt really out of my depth, and I suppose a little bit of that imposter syndrome kicks in, and should I even be here? What am I doing? And then I suppose with some of the opportunities that I've had with Rugby Bricks, coaching people, meeting people, developing skill, relationships being built, one of the key ones was Ryan Pappenhausen. So when I first got over to Melbourne, it was when I released the RB88. He was actually one of the first people to ever kick off it. Ryan Pap had just signed with the Storm. This is before Ryan Pappenhausen became Ryan Pappenhausen. Yeah. He asked me he's like, hey, bro, keen to add goal kicking to my repertoire. Can we have a session? We'd never met before. Head down to the field, had a kicking session with Ryan Pap, the old Steeden balls, first time kicking those. And he kicked off the tee, and we had one great session. He got busy with Storm, and that was kind of it.
What date are we looking at here?
Oh, this is definitely 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. And then every now and then on social media, just a couple of messages here and there, but nothing too substantial. And then fast forward to this year, I'm driving and I get a call from Frank Panisi, who's the general manager of the Melbourne Storm, and he's been a huge part of the success. He's been there for just as long as Craig Bellamy has been, and has spoken about in really high regard. Someone I'd love to get on the podcast, actually, to talk through his success. And a call from him, hey, Pete, Ryan's, put your name forward with the kicking stuff. We would love for you to come in for 3 weeks. Cam Smith's retired. He'd finally announced that he was going to retire. Can you come in? The boys need some help. And so all of a sudden I'm presenting to the group. One of the key things that I wanted to do is I wanted to present to the kickers the 10 pillars of goal kicking, because I wanted to...
I can't even let you go on at the moment. What did you do after that phone call? Because I remember when I spoke to you, but at that phone call, that's a huge pinnacle moment. I can't let you get past. Did you lose your shit?
I was really excited, but like anything in my brain, it's like 30 seconds of excitement, and then it goes straight to, holy shit, I've got to turn up and meet these blokes and deliver. Walk into the Melbourne Storm offices and turn up and deliver. And so I spoke with the coaches, keen. Before we get on the field, I'd love to have a sit-down chat with the kickers just to tell them where I'm coming from. And the main thing, a lot of these guys weren't very organised with their goal-kicking techniques. Ryan Pap, Cameron Munster, Nico Hines, Cooper Johns, Aaron Booth, Tyson Smoothie. I don't think I've left anyone else, the initial group. And so I wanted to present to them on the 10 pillars of goal kicking, because then they would start thinking about their goal kicking technique. And then when we got out onto the field, they could understand the big picture of what we were trying to achieve. Before that, and this is a really important point, I listened to a podcast with Bryan Cranston, the Breaking Bad, and what was he before that? Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah.
That actor. And he was talking about on the podcast is one of the big mistakes he made when auditioning is he always auditioned to try and get a job, or he was always trying to get to the next level. So rather than trying to get a job, he changed his mindset to do a job. Whenever he got an opportunity to turn up and do a job. And it's really stuck with me. So my first opportunity with the Storm was, you've got 3 weeks to do a job, and that's it. Don't try to get a job, turn up, deliver, review things hard out, talk with the boys, absolutely nail these 3 weeks. And that's what I went in there and I went really hard with it, presented well. My presentation, which I've still got, storm images, the boys are kicking, which they were blown away with. Journals, getting them to write down their techniques. So definitely over delivered in the first couple of weeks. Got the soccer balls out, and people that follow the content know why I love using soccer balls. They love that. And we saw really good improvements. And I think, did the job really well for 3 weeks. Then Frank spoke to me about, hey, we're keen to keep you on for the season. Things are going really well. And it's just been good, which we can talk about, just evolving into how they play, why they kick, how they kick, strategies, structures, and it's just evolving into conversations around skill set, working with halves, passing technique, and all those different opportunities now. It's been a really surreal feeling, but I'm absolutely loving it.
I think congratulations are in order, and so it's an amazing achievement, right? To be with a professional team, but one the caliber of the Storm. And also, obviously, in the space of, if we look at it from, like you said, Whangarei to Melbourne, where there's just the performance or the high performance culture is so prevalent. It's a huge achievement, Rose. So I think congrats on that front. You've mentioned a few key things in there that I wanted to touch on quickly. And the first, obviously, with Ryan Pat. He's become obviously a bit of a stalwart, and people know and recognize his skill set within league. I followed a lot of his stuff. He's a different type of player in the fact that he promotes a lot of the things that we care about and the values that we have. What do you think has made him special? And obviously have the humility to have that chat, to reach out at the start to get some help from you.
Hungry for knowledge and extremely curious, and is willing to put in the work to do it. So his brain probably never stops. He's a really deep thinker. He really cares about his own performance. He'll stay on the field until he's nailed it. And I think he's really bought into the 10 pillars of goal kicking. We've had a couple of catch-ups now in cafes and spoke through kicking and life. And he's probably what the other thing too, when you're a kicker for the Storm, that's great, but you've actually got to make the starting team to be the kicker. So our options were basically Ryan Pappenhausen or Cameron Munster were the kickers. The other guys are fantastic kickers. You got to make the team so you can kick. So Ryan obviously can make the team, and he's really brought into it. He probably has handled the pressure better than the other guys as well. A game kick is completely different to a training kick, and I think Ryan's been able to separate himself through breathing, through his mindset, and execute really well on the field.
Yeah, and I like that. I think that's pretty cool. The other piece that you mentioned there, obviously, is Bryan Cranston, right? And that Breaking Bad. But you're listening to a podcast that's outside of your area. And one of those things I've said is obviously jumping across into different lanes for learning. And so I'm keen to sort of hear from you how much of your own professional development is outside your lane, and the fact that you're jumping across into different stuff and different things to get these sort of learning outcomes that you're after, and how do you apply that to your coaching?
Yeah, good question. One of the things that I definitely have learned is that everything in this world, and I got this from Steve Jobs, was made by humans, and they're all human ideas, and people just having a crack and becoming really obsessed with whatever they're trying to do. So I love listening to actors, because I think their world, how good's that chainsaw outside the window? So actors' worlds are, they have to be obsessed, because they won't get the gigs, they won't get the roles unless they're talented, and seriously talented. So I get really inspired by those guys telling their stories about how much effort they put into a role, how much learning they put into a role, years of preparation just to get the job right, because this is going to be on screen. So I guess that's why I like hearing their stories, how they went about it, because it's all the same stuff: problem solving, being inspired, getting to the top. Having to hang in there I think is a really good recipe for success.
Do you remember that podcast, the name of it?
No, I don't, but it might come to me as this podcast goes on.
We'll get it show notes and get them over to Joe, eh?
We'll chuck it in there.
Awesome. All right. So one of the things that I quite like hearing, and it's hard for a lot of people to do this, But what are some beliefs that you had 3 years ago in coaching, or when you entered coaching, that you've now done a 180 on? And I think for a lot of people, that most people don't like to correct their beliefs, or they don't like looking like they were wrong. Is there anything that you think has changed or drastically allowed you to flip that you now think differently about?
Probably not drastically. I think one of the things that I definitely have continued to learn is how much time you need to put into anything, especially when it comes to the skill stuff like goal kicking. And I think that's been one of the nice things for Ryan is, and I've said to him, mate, you might not be any good at this for 2 years. So let's just work on this week to week and develop and learn, understand your technique. So there's probably been a lot of that. More just understanding of that, instead of trying to come into a session saying I'm going to solve all your problems and be the best coach in the world and deliver the best session ever, is probably just remembering that it's the repetition, it's the hours, it's the learning of constantly showing up, which is going to get it done in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's pivotal for anything, right? Is I think of, when you're taking strides, and it's like this business. Honestly, I saw other people having businesses, and I would always read the articles where someone makes a huge amount of money in a short space of time. I'm like, great, I'm going to be a millionaire super soon. And then, 4 years later, okay, cool. That took a lot longer than we even to get to the place to give it to the point where we've got a team that can actually execute on any of those visions, well, let alone the part of actually that key piece. So I'm, super impressed to sort of see that that's the part where you've gone down that road of obviously understanding and getting people to, one, say this isn't going to happen overnight, because most of us over promise and under deliver. And I think that's one of the things that, I've certainly worked on, and we've worked on in the chat for you and I, is, under promising and over delivering.
I think one thing too, and I know that a lot of our listeners will be coaches, is there's a big difference in organizing a team and building players and building a team. I think a lot of club coaches, pure through lack of time, school coaches as well, just end up organizing a team. Let's just get a team on the field, the team list, whatever. We can play a game of rugby. But I think the best thing for players, and what I'm passionate about, is building best players in the world. But you have to build them. You have to help them develop, put all your time and energy to developing skill set, understanding all those little things. So don't just organize a training session. Help build people and build players.
I want to dive into that, obviously, is organizing versus building, and that key piece there around the build part. If you're a new coach and you're coming into this and you just hear that, what does it look like to actually build people versus obviously just getting in, throwing people together?
It's in my role. That's all I do is through Rugby Bricks is one-on-one building of players. But I think it's hard when you're sort of the head coach, or you're the only person in charge of your team. In that area, I'd probably be a little bit selfish with 3 or 4 players that you can really see as a project and build. As I've done this podcast and spoken to other coaches, they've always had little mini projects within the teams that they've been coaching on certain players. And you only got so much time in a week as a coach as well. I think if you get really obsessed with 1 or 2 or 3 players, build them. So if it's a halfback, cool, I'm going to work with you. We're going to talk about it, conversations, repetitions on your halfback pass. And in the next 3 months, we're going to develop that into your games that you can use it on field. We'll add that in, and then we'll build the next block as well. So so the team benefits, the player benefits. They might get to another level of competition or team that they're trying with their own goals. Whereas if I just focus on the 15, let's just organise a team, get them on the field, we all end up being quite mediocre.
Yeah. When you were, and obviously you said, and this is the same problem for all of us, right? We're time poor. And sometimes in the case of players, right, relatively resource rich. How do you choose those 3 to 4 players to be selfish with and start working to build up?
They always put their hand up. They're always obvious. I think we can all think about a team or environment we're involved with, the people that want it and are keen and driven to actually do it. I don't think in a team environment everyone's ready for it either. A lot of people have got stuff going on in their own lives. So the 3 or 4 will be really obvious.
Yeah, right. So they'll put their hand up by performance, what they've said, how they are and who they are.
Yeah, they're probably asking you for extras already. and then just get after it with them.
Yeah, nice. So I guess, we're at our 50th episode, and obviously the cool part, Rugby Bricks is a tea, the tea in itself and the products. We're in 50 plus countries around the world, mate. Did you envision it to get this big? Did you ever just have the feeling that, collectively that we'd have over, 250,000 followers across all of our channels? What did that look like? And did you have the forecasting and the foresight to say this is where we're headed?
I think I always knew I wanted it to get to this place. I don't know if I had the vision, but I definitely, nothing's really changed. So every time we're doing anything, I know that if it is going to really hit deep with a kicker, with someone who's really obsessed about their own kicking process, their own journey, like I know that there's hundreds of thousands of people around the world all in the same mindset. They're obsessed with kicking. They want to get better at it. So I knew that the opportunity was there, and we've never tried to go out to the masses and sort of just blanket put out information. It's always been really targeted at the individual. So did I envision that would be selling kicking tees to over 50 countries and distribution and all the rest of it? No, I really didn't. But I knew that if I wanted to grow Rugby Bricks, I was going to have to get some people around me that could help in those certain areas, and you've definitely been one of those. And as the team grows, it's really exciting.
I want to touch on this and from a marketing perspective, but there's a really good article called 1,000 True Fans from Kevin Kelly, which talks about like delighting and giving the world's class experience to just the smallest group of people you can, and then it bleeds at the edges as it gets bigger. And I think, the key piece that you mentioned there was that, I started with a kicker in mind. There's a small enough audience for me to want to try that too. And I just really wanted to over deliver for just kickers. And as we've grown, those people have talked about it as a great kicker. There's also happens to be great passing content. And so for anyone listening, I think, for the companies that I've worked with, as they work on really, really delighting and serving just one person really, really well, and then it bleeds out to a larger and larger group. And so it's, I think, something that you have done, and you've done really, really well. And whether or not you've known that to be your entire marketing strategy or not, it's certainly worked pretty well.
Well, I heard it explained once about how your brand doesn't just have one meaning. So if I take Instagram following, right, we've got 138,000 Instagram followers. Our brand Rugby Bricks doesn't mean one meaning. It means 138,000 different meanings, and the whole outwork and outlearn things. There's so many different stories behind the Rugby Bricks. It means different things to different people. Same with all the brands that we all use and know and love. It means different things to different people. But as long as you can know what it means to us as a company, us as a brand, then and we stay true to that, which we always do, I think that's sort of led to their success as well.
Nice. And touching on that next, seeing the teas at the World Cup.
Yeah.
What was that feeling?
Yeah, that was big. That was a big one for me and Leo, actually, for me and Dad, because he, as I was starting to talk about developing a tea, like the very first tea, he could see I was struggling with it because there was some shitty prototypes, to be honest, and some money spent before we got one. And he always was supportive as always, and that was special to see the Japan kicker using it at the Rugby World Cup. That was a big moment and pretty special for us both. The original RB88 and that grey marble sort of Remarkables colour, and then fast forward till now, like it's just constantly we get reminded of who's using it, where it is in the world, different kickers. I'm loving what's happening in the US at the moment. They're really getting on board with Rugby Bricks, which is really exciting.
Yeah, bet. And Leo did mention that obviously you guys went through some relatively tough starting points when the first products came out. And I think there's been a few other podcasts where we've mentioned maybe the old brush tea that you had a crack at. So yeah. I've seen those myself and they weren't great. But
fucking brush tea.
I guess one of the ones that I want to do in going future thinking is, where do you foresee rugby going in the next 5 years? Do you see a growth in the game? Do you see a decline? What are the trends that you're picking up that you think others should pay attention to, and ones that you're sort of trying to pay attention to yourself?
I think overall, the Super Rugby has really, we've been playing either, the New Zealand comp, the Australian comp. I think the pointed difference within rugby and Super Rugby is that it's an international game. So a Super Rugby player gets to travel to Australia, South Africa, Argentina, Japan. Hopefully Japan gets into Super Rugby. That is kind of what's special to rugby union, and they need to protect it and get it back ASAP, because it's such a great pool for players. When I see the game not becoming more professional. I think that there's so much professional chat around strength and conditioning, GPS stats. I think the game's got plenty of that. It's an area that has such a long tail, where I think the game will go as more specialist coaches that have a better understanding of the game, more detailed game plans. I think one of the big differences between Super Rugby, Aotearoa and Australia is how detailed phase to phase the game is, the Kiwi teams. We were speaking earlier in the day about how in any one phase, there's like 6 players in motion that can all get the ball that are really hard to defend, whereas some of the teams that aren't up to the same standard, there might only be 2 players in motion, which is very predictable and easy to read. So I think we'll probably see a little bit more specialist coaching. The cream will keep rising to the top. It seems like the game's growing, definitely in the female space, which I'm in with the Wallaroos. Spoke with Chelsea Ellie last week on the podcast. The numbers are going through the roof with females playing rugby. There's some really cool stuff coming out around contact and building the contact side of rugby, so that we are teaching players safe tackle technique from a much younger age, and some smart things around that, because parents are a big piece of this puzzle. If they don't want their kids playing a contact sport, that's tough. But if we have a contact plan around developing the skill set around the contact areas of the game, that's only going to benefit us.
And if you're a player, I'll start with the player first, what would be sort of 2 to 3 pieces that you tell them to work on the most outside of the hard skills? So obviously the kicking, passing, all those technical skills. You put in the hours, and I do believe you'll get the results on it. What are sort of 2 to 3 other things that you think that most should start to focus on?
This is going to be a pretty predictable answer, but skill set. So we all watch the professional game and we see these amazing, fit, muscly, big athletes, and so a younger player thinks, cool, if I just get big, muscly and fast, that's it, problem solved. Whereas the best players, Damian McKenzie, Aaron Smith, it's their skill set that stands out on the field, especially for those backs. If it's a line out lock, it's all those aerial skills and how good they are at scrummaging and their technique. So I think with whatever your training program is, just make sure it's 50-50. So 50% S&C and 50% skill and rugby knowledge. Because the easier thing to chase at the moment is the gym, the S&C stuff. I think if more players put more time and effort into chasing rugby knowledge, coaching, skill work, you'll stand out so much.
Yeah, I think that encompasses a lot, and I'll move to the next one. And for coaches, where do you think coaches should be spending that time in terms of, if you had to say, look, there's only, I can give you 2 to 3 pieces of things to focus on, or even one thing, what would that be going forward?
I think building players, like I mentioned earlier, because when you build a player, you understand an area so much better. An example for myself was I wanted to build one of the girls here, Georgia's box kick. So all of a sudden I found myself doing box kicks as well, and understanding the feel of it, the why behind it, which has helped me as a coach, because now I can move into other teams and other areas and help build their box kick. So I think building of players will help grow your knowledge, and you'll become more curious. You'll have more conversations. If you want to build a front rower, okay, let's work on your scrummaging. Who can we get to help us both learn, building that? The other reason why I think that's important is a head coach is going to be looking for an assistance that can solve a problem for them. So if I'm an attack coach and I want to employ a line out coach or bring someone in, I want someone who knows their shit, and I can give them that area of the line out to deliver on, and we have a good line out. Because as a head coach, I can't oversee all that. So I guess that's the part of the game. Like, yes, all the soft skills and people and leadership groups is great. It's all very important, but you will get coaching roles if you're really good at understanding the game, positions, and how to build players.
Yeah, nice. I like that a lot. I think I'm going to come up into sort of last two questions as we go into this. So I think one of the things that you're good at, and what is very different for me from what I find with rugby, is that people find it very hard to correct themselves or change their opinions or go through. When you're working with the players and you've got athletes that are sort of, maybe in some form of leadership role, or at least, have had been reinforced from a previous coach, and similar to what we're talking about this morning, and the fact that, they've just been told they're the greatest and the best thing since sliced bread. How do you correct them or change course so that you can get the outcomes that you're after?
So a book that we've both listened to or read lately was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think that's a nice way to, and a really good listen. I'd highly recommend it. And I probably look at myself, like think about myself 5 years ago and all the learnings and ideas that have now changed with different ways of thinking. I think it's just a learning process. And as a coach, you can influence someone to start thinking about things differently. If they're behaving in a certain way, or their habits or lifestyle is not setting them up for success to be one of the best players in the world on the international stage, then a ruck up doesn't really do anything. But influencing a behavior or helping them in another area might just give them the little kick that they need to get things rolling. So that's how I'd suggest that. And I suppose technically on the field, it's the exact same thing. Hey, I was watching you pass last week. I noticed this in your past. Have you thought about trying this? And if they haven't got an answer, like, yeah, I tried that 2 years ago, I worked on it, it just doesn't work for me. Great, no worries. But usually they don't have an answer for that. So, okay, can we try a couple now and influence them that way?
Yeah, nice. I like that a lot. And I think it's one of those things that I think, if we're coming back to the very beginning of this, as leaders, and it's certainly different manners, is that you can tell people or you can guide them and influence them. And I think one of those things is, as long as you get to the key outcome of being able to influence and get the same outcome without directly telling someone, you still got the outcome you wanted, right? And it doesn't always have to be that barking, yelling. It can be, hey, have you thought about this differently? Or, prompted someone to do something differently. So I like that a lot, bro.
Yeah. And I think just being exposed to Craig Bellamy is his influence is incredible. The amount of stuff he doesn't need to say because of his behaviors and how he communicates has been really cool for me to be exposed to. And he influences so much.
Yeah. So I really like that last question you asked me, which was, who is someone that you've met in the last year that you think is, world-class, or obviously changed in the most sort of important person, or most fascinating type person? I want to reflect that back on you and sort of say that any people that you've met, the top 2 to 3, or even 1 to 3 that you've met in the last year that have just stood out to you in a massive way.
First one would be Craig Bellamy. I've had only a handful of conversations with him. As head coach, he doesn't have too much to do with a kicking coach on a daily basis. But we had a really good conversation, just being exposed to how everyone talks about the effort at the Melbourne Storm. They really focus on effort. So that's been cool to see. And the one thing I have been exposed to is the detail behind the effort plays that they look for. So I don't just, and I use the boxing analogy. If you and I were to jump in the ring with a world-class boxer, say Floyd Mayweather, and I said to you, Kale, like, just give me effort, 100% give me effort, you're still going to get your ass kicked because you've got no skill, you've got no technical ability. So I can't just ask you just for effort. I have to give you strategies, tactics. It has to be measurable. I have to have little things around your boxing technique that we'll look for and focus on this week. And I think that's the cool thing, is the stuff Craig gives to the media and a video camera is, yeah, the boys gave us good effort today. but man, there's some detail behind that stuff. So he's been really cool for my coaching behind that. And then another one, so Merry People is a company over here. So Danny Holloway, she's a friend of mine. I lived with her partner, Nick, for 2 years here in Melbourne. She's got a brand called Merry People Gumboots, and she's been a big inspiration with her business. She's doing some incredible stuff. Her sales figures and numbers at the moment would blow you away. She's working with people or having conversations with people like Karen Walker from New Zealand, and just one of those people that's just out there getting it, obsessed with her brand, obsessed with her customer and product, and really has had a big influence.
Awesome. Cool. Great examples too. And again, I think one's outside of the normal lane of footy and one's inside of that lane, and the crossover again is there. So I think that's something probably, if I can share anything for the way this episode's headed, is obviously don't look obviously and stay inside your lane. There's other incredible learnings you can take from other people. But I think for me, I want to say congrats. 50 podcast episodes is huge, let alone for where the brand's got to itself, mate. And I know I joined relatively early, but there's a huge amount of success that you've brought to this yourself. And so I think, coming back to that is the customers and the people that have bought from us. Thank you. You're the reason that we're able to do this. We really, really love, the people, the fans, the people that are supporting Rugby Ricks. It means a huge amount to us. And I know, especially to me, if I'm wearing a Rugby Ricks tee and I'll be training in the gym, and it's happened to me here in Alexandra a couple of times. I'll walk into the gym and people recognize the brand and they talk very, very highly of it. So I think there's that thank you. And then for everyone here who's listened to us for 50, episodes now, we want to keep kicking on and hopefully to 100.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your help. I appreciate all your honesty. You hit me between the eyes with a lot of stuff, which is needed, especially when we're working as fast and as quick as we are. There's no time for too many pats on the back. So, I appreciate all that you've done for the brand and for the customer, for the listener. Again, as Kale mentioned, thanks so much for tuning into the podcast. It's been a huge personal development thing for me. So love doing them. But thanks, man. Thanks for the questions. Good shit.
Yeah, great podcast. Very much enjoyed.
Cool, man. See you
next one.